Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Marley and this is Sourcing Yourself. And last week I talked a lot about artist development, but this week I want to talk about what is happening in the collective and what that all means for us and how do we go through what is really a collective trauma and a collective crisis. I haven't ever been through a pandemic, obviously, but I don't think any of us have, but I have been through a lot of psycho-spiritual crises in my young life that I wanted to draw some wisdom from, because I feel that there are a lot of parallels between spiritual crisis and the coronavirus. I think that what we're going through is a spiritual crisis. I think it's a collective initiation and a call to evolve spiritually, but what that entails in the process of dismantling and restructuring is a lot of fear, a lot of disorientation, a lot of grief, a lot of overwhelming emotions, and basically a loss of ground. And how does one cope with that? Excuse me while I take a sip of water. So, the corona is a collective trauma. I did a little research on the nature of trauma before I started recording, and it really drove the point home even more that that's what we're going through, and some people are feeling that on a greater scale than others. But I wanted to start off and just give the definition of what is trauma. Well, trauma is a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms the individual's ability to cope. This, I would say, is also under the category of a near-death experience, which is actually a spiritual emergence. There's a manual actually that lists the different categories of spiritual emergence, and near-death experience is one of them. Why is this a near-death experience? Well, all of us are kind of being faced with the reality of possibly getting corona and potentially dying, although the chance of that is not a high probability in reality. But anyways, the threat and the potential is there. So as I was saying, we are going through a collective trauma and a near-death experience, which affects our inner resources and ability to cope, as well as our outer resources. Many of us have lost our jobs and our sense of financial security. So what can one do in a spiritual crisis, in a pandemic experience where we are all feeling disoriented and don't have any reference points for what's happening and are pretty much overwhelmed on multiple levels? Well, I would say that the greatest resource that we can practice is something called being moment to moment, where we are just practicing mindfulness, noticing and observing the sensations in our bodies, and not future tripping and going too far off into thinking about what's going to happen. There is a term in trauma recovery called resourcing, and resourcing is basically the ability to feel good, nurtured, and calm within oneself. When a person is in a state of trauma and crisis, it's hard to feel resourced. So finding things that make you feel resourced. Just to give a couple of examples, it's basically anything that makes you feel like yourself. Just to give a couple of examples, for me, taking an Epsom salt bath is really, really grounding. Grounding is a huge part of resourcing, so anything that brings you back into your body that makes you feel connected to the stability of the earth, which right now things are not feeling very stable. So drawing on the earthing energy of Mother Nature, that could be going outside, hiking, walking barefoot, getting in lakes and rivers. It might not be warm enough to do that yet, but getting into earth energy in any capacity is extremely grounding and resourcing. Let's see, what else? Being in our creativity, I have found being in creativity and inspiration sometimes is the most grounding and resourcing thing, like possibly more grounding and resourcing than getting into nature. That's just personal for me. You have to experiment and see what works for you. And as I said, whatever makes you feel like yourself and connects you to the deeper part of yourself and your spirit and your essence. For me, that's singing, that's writing, that's dancing, that is listening to my favorite music, being with animals, huge. Dogs, their unconditional love, and just they emanate unconditional love. Being around dogs and animals is a huge resourcing and sense of stability. Talking to friends, socializing. Obviously, we're practicing social distancing right now, so we can't go and be with people, but just connecting on social media or phone. The thing that I wanted to say, and I kind of skipped forward, so I forgot about this part, but this was really, really interesting to me because I personally haven't felt like I'm in a severe crisis at this moment in time with this pandemic, but I'm aware that what's happening collectively is affecting me on some level, but I wasn't fully aware of how. But I have been experiencing headaches and stomach aches, which is really unusual for me. And I was thinking that it was because I was cooped up in the house maybe, and there was stuck energy and just I needed to get out and I hadn't been getting out enough. And I actually looked up, when I was looking up the definition of trauma, it said that one of the symptoms is nausea, dizziness, altered sleep, headaches, and GI problems. I'm experiencing all 5 of those. So there you go. Even though I have a roof over my head, I'm not terribly worried about money right now, thank God. Even though I lost my job. I have been affected by this because being an energetically sensitive person, we feel what's going on in the collective and we feel the collective fear. So, something that's not grounding and resourcing is watching too much of the goddamn news. I'm sorry. It's good to be informed, but at some point you need to just take a break from it because that is fear mongering like a motherfucker. Two of my favorite spiritual teachers that I look up to a lot, Padre Pio, he's in the Catholic faith, and Paramahansa Yogananda, he was a enlightened yogi from India. Both of them said to not watch the news and just pray. Just pray. Talk to God. Because, yes, on some level, what's happening is very, very real. But in the spiritual realm, this is... I'm sorry, I'm covering up my arm because it's kind of looking fat right now and I don't like it. We all getting chunky. In this thing. Anyways, in the material sense, all of this is very real and it's happening. But in the spiritual realm, this is God's movie. It's a cosmic drama. Things like this are going to continue to happen, but as long as we are in tune with our higher power and our God source and our God essence, sourcing yourself, we don't have to take this life so seriously. That's actually one of my favorite talks that Yogananda gave, when he was saying that when you find God, that is the funeral to all sorrows. And being a human being on this planet, we have a lot of them. Okay, I've gotten totally off topic. Well, not totally, but I've digressed a little bit. So, okay, the last thing I wanted to say about Corona. How can we look at this as the gift that it potentially could be? On a micro level, for myself personally, it's given me the opportunity to have the time and space to put energy towards things that I had been avoiding, but that I really knew that I was called to do. One of them being starting a YouTube channel. I would not be sitting here with you recording this if I was still probably in my other job. So that's a huge blessing. It's a blessing that I'm able to collect unemployment and kind of reinvent myself, which I think a lot of people are going to have to do, possibly out of need. The people who work in the gig economy, or people who work in restaurants and hospitality. I don't know why I'm so nervous for this one. I just really wanted to do this video justice, so I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, so excuse me. And I'm not editing it. This is all off the cuff. As I was saying, the opportunity is to reinvent ourselves and catch up with ourselves, find some stillness, some rest and reflection, face the things that we've been avoiding. I think many of us stay busy to avoid things that we really would rather not deal with or look at. For me, there was definitely some things going on underneath the surface that started to bubble up, being in the stillness, and it was very uncomfortable, but I have been able to work through it, and I'm grateful. So this is an opportunity to get free and to work out some things in ourselves that we haven't wanted to really look at. The other benefit is just because of this trauma and this near-death experience, it kind of puts things into razor-sharp perspective. What is actually important? How are we really to be spending our time? If you want to get really deep, what is your soul purpose? Why did you incarnate in this lifetime? What are you here to do? What is your mission work? What service are you here to do for people? How are you to share your gifts? With the potential for death, that puts things into razor sharp perspective. Yeah. The other thing I would say is just having greater compassion for one another and our humanity, and we are all so in our own little individual realities most of the time and in our own little phone world, and I feel that the gift of this is just realizing how we are all really one. In many spiritual traditions, they would say that it's actually an illusion that we're separate and that we all share one consciousness. And people who are enlightened and who have gone to higher states of consciousness talk about the incredible feeling of bliss and oneness in going past our little individual ego selves. And I feel that we're kind of getting a little bit of a taste of that because we are all seeing how we are all in this together and how we are not alone in the universe and how we are really just, we are in this together. And that has given me so many wonderful feelings, just seeing how everybody is really respecting the shelter at home mandate and looking out for one another and stepping up to help people, and the charities that have, or the organizations that have come together to help people financially. It's just a beautiful thing. And the nurses and the doctors and the people on the front lines who are risking their lives for our safety and our well-being. It's just, it makes me want to tear up. It's so heroic and selfless. And those people are amazing beings. So I know that there are a ton of things that I wanted to say that I probably forgot to mention. I did also want to talk about how grief, I think a lot of us are feeling collective grief right now at just the loss that many families are going through from people who lost their lives to this. I just want to take a moment of silence for them. I hope that wherever they are in the universe, they are not suffering anymore and in a better place. And I feel that we are collectively grieving that, along with maybe our jobs and possibly our old identities, because life as we know it is going to be forever changed. I mean, we will move and get beyond this, absolutely. We will recover, we will rebuild, we will adapt, change, and evolve as we already have started to do. But life as we know it is never going to be the same, and there is grief in that. And so the best thing that I have found, and I'll admit I have a hard time doing this because I'm so in my head a lot of the time, but just dropping down into your heart and breathing. Breathe love. I have a whole other video on breathe love I'm gonna do, but listen to some binaural beats and just breathe and just like let yourself feel your grief and cry. Just let yourself cry, just heave. I've been doing it and it's really helping me get through. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that some of the tips were helpful. I hope that it resonated. This video is really inspired by my spiritual crisis that I went through. I feel that I'm so oriented with crisis that I am like a way shower for people. Like, oh, welcome, take your badge, here's your name tag. Yep, here's orientation crisis right here. So I just want to be of service in any way that I can. And part of being of service for me is coming out of hiding, because I like to hide in the closet. Coming out of hiding and sharing my gifts and my wisdom and my knowledge and my experience so that I can help other people. And with that, I guess I'll wrap up and say thank you if you've watched this. If you've liked anything that you've heard, please subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Be well.